Story of the World, Volume 2, Chapter 41, Part 2. Jacques Cartier's Discoveries. Spain, Portugal, and England were all building colonies in the Americas. The King of France decided that he didn't want to be left out. When he learned about the fish-filled waters around Newfoundland, he ordered a French explorer named Jacques Cartier to go find out more about this new land. In 1534, Jacques Cartier set off to claim some of the new land for France. But Cartier had another plan in mind as well. He still wanted to find a way to China. He hoped that he could sail through the North Atlantic Ocean, find a river that cut right through the whole continent of North America, come out the other side, and then sail straight to the Chinese coast. Cartier got a good start to his adventure. His journey to North America took less than 3 weeks. When he arrived at Newfoundland, he sailed around the island and drew a map of it. Then he explored and mapped the smaller islands nearby. Now it was time to look for the river that would take him all the way across the continent. Cartier sailed past Newfoundland into the waters that we now call the Gulf of St. Lawrence. He discovered that these waters ended in a river that seemed to wind straight into North America. Could this be the river that flowed through the continent? Perhaps it was. But before Cartier could explore this river, he had to make friends with the Native Americans who lived nearby. He didn't want to sail down his newly discovered river with hostile tribes on either bank ready to attack him as soon as he landed. So Cartier and his men landed on the North American shores and made friends with the people who lived there, the Micmacs. The Micmacs had learned how to survive the cold northern winters. They lived in wigwams, cone-shaped huts made of animal skins stretched over wooden timbers. These wigwams could be taken apart and moved. So during the warm summers, the Micmacs moved their villages to the coast, where they would fish and swim in the waters. In the fall, when the wind began to grow cold, the Micmacs took their wigwams apart and journeyed back into the deep woods away from the ocean. Here the trees would protect them from the cold northern winds. When Cartier asked the Micmacs, "What is this land called?" they thought he was asking them the name of their small summer settlement on the coast. "We call it the village," they answered him. In the Micmac language, the village sounds like Canada. So Cartier called all of the vast expanse of land before him Canada. We still call it Canada today. As Cartier explored the Micmac land, he met a hunting party from another tribe who lived further away, along the river that Cartier hoped would lead him to China. This tribe was called the Hurons. Their chief, Donnacona, and his 2 sons were part of the hunting party. When they described their home to Cartier, he wanted to sail down the river at once to see it. But winter was coming, and Cartier knew that his men might not be able to survive the Canadian cold. He decided reluctantly that they would return to France and come back again in the spring. But he wanted to show his new discoveries to the French king. So he asked Donnacona, "Can I take your sons back to France with me?" Donnacona didn't want his 2 boys to disappear into the mysterious waters beyond Newfoundland. But finally he agreed to let his sons go. They waved goodbye to their father and boarded Cartier's ship, which sailed away and vanished over the horizon. Donnacona waited and waited. An entire year went by with no sign of his boys. Would his sons ever return? Finally, Donnacona heard reports that the strangers had landed again on the coast of Canada. He gathered a party of warriors with him and hurried toward the ships. When the Hurons arrived, they saw Cartier and his men preparing to journey into Canada along the river. And they also saw Donnacona's sons. They were taller and stronger. "The Frenchmen want to sail down the river towards our homeland," they told their father. Donnacona was grateful to have his boys back. He welcomed Cartier and treated him as a friend. So Cartier and his men began their journey down the river, which we now call the St. Lawrence River. They sailed farther and farther down the St. Lawrence River, closer and closer to Huron land. And soon, Donnacona began to get nervous. How far would these strangers go? What would they do to the Huron people when they landed? When Cartier came ashore at the Huron village where Donnacona lived and announced, "I claim this land for France," Donnacona decided that they had gone far enough. "No further," he ordered. "I am the king of this land, and I command you to stop here." And 3 of Donnacona's priests, or medicine men, dressed up like devils to frighten Cartier. "Go no further," they warned, "or disaster will come upon you." Cartier ignored Donnacona and his priests. He boarded his ships again and went on. But soon the river began to grow shallower and narrower. Cartier watched the shores nervously. If the St. Lawrence went all the way to the Pacific, it would grow wider and deeper again. Before long, Cartier saw rapids ahead, places in the river where the bottom is so shallow that huge rocks jut up into the air through the water. The water bubbled and frothed around these rocks. Cartier knew that the river was coming to an end. The St. Lawrence River would not lead him to China. But he didn't want to return to France empty-handed. And he had heard the Hurons tell tales about a rich land filled with gold and jewels farther north. So Cartier went back to Donnacona's village and kidnapped the king of the Hurons. He took him back to France to tell these tales of treasure to the French king. Donnacona died in France without ever seeing his native country again. When the French king heard the stories of a rich, mysterious northern land, he sent Cartier back for a 3rd trip. This time, Cartier found another river, lined with sparkling stones all along its banks. He was sure that he had discovered the land of jewels. But when he arrived back in France with his boatload of treasure, the French laughed at him. The stones were worthless, common quartz, and the stories of the Hurons had just been fairy tales. Cartier, disgusted, never returned to Canada. But his journeys to Canada had shown other explorers and traders that there was much more land to discover beyond the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Soon, Canadian merchants were making regular journeys to Canada, trading with the Indians for rich skins and other goods. 70 years later, the French established the first year-round colony in Canada. Today, many people who live in Canada speak French because of the French-speaking settlers who came to live in this new land.